So currently we can add events to a marker through our library. All we have to do is pass through an object literal and give details about the event and the action to take on that event. So in this case, when we click on this marker, we'll get click alerted to us. So in addition to having this click event, we might also want to drag end event since this marker is draggable. But the way our options are set up is that it only takes this one event in. So in this lesson, we'll go through and we'll change this to allow us to add multiple events. So how do we change this from taking in a single event to allowing multiple events? Well, rather than just adding one object, we can allow multiple, and we can support multiple objects with an array. So if we wrap the object in array brackets, and then we'll copy it, and we'll create another event as well. And the second object will be for the drag end event. And now since we're passing through more than one event, we can change this from event to events. So if we click on our marker, we don't actually get an event firing off. And that's because our current API doesn't know how to deal with an array of events. So we'll go into our Mapster library, and then within our add marker function, we can see we're checking to see if there's an event. And if there's an event, we're firing it off with the this._on function. So we need to change this from firing off from one event to multiple. So first we want to check to see if there's any events. And if the options contains the events object, then we want to loop through it and attach each one of the events. So if we call the forEach function on the events array, we can attach each event as we loop through. But currently, we're going to have an issue with this right here, because this is not the Mapster library inside the forEach function. So up here where we're creating our variables, we can assign self to this. So this way we know that we'll have the reference to our Mapster library. So now if we go and we click on the marker, we're still not getting a click event. So let's check out the console. So in the console we can see we get an uncaught type error, and it tells us that undefined is not a function. So when we click to see where the source is, we can see we get it on this._on. So let's log this to the console to see what it is when we're inside the forEach. So in this case, this is the window, and we need that to be the Mapster library. So let's go back and change that. So to make this refer to the Mapster library, there's a little trick we can do. We can store a variable called self to this. And so inside the forEach, we can say self._on. So now we'll click the marker, and we get the alert box. And now we'll drag the marker, and we get the dragged alert box. So we're now able to deal with multiple events for markers, but we aren't able to deal with multiple events for the map. So we can easily abstract out this function to our library, and then we can reuse it for any object that can handle events. So we'll create a function, and we'll call it _attach events. And that'll take in the object that we want to attach the events onto, and then the events themselves. So this is the same block of code from above. We're calling the forEach function on the events array, and we're attaching each event as we loop through. So now up here, we can change this block of code, and we can just call this .attach events. So we'll pass through the marker because we want to attach the events onto that object, and then we'll pass through the events themselves. And down in our attach events function, we need to change this from saying marker to object. So when we click, we get clicked, and now when we drag, we get dragged. Let's make sure that our event arguments are still accessible as well. So inside the callback, we'll log out the event argument. So now when we click, we can see that we get our event argument. However, there's one thing that we could add to this function to make it a bit more useful, and that's actually returning the object that was clicked. So in this case, we're adding a marker to the map, but we actually don't have access to this marker until the function has been returned inside of this marker2 variable. So what would be useful is if we could provide the second parameter, and whenever this callback is fired off, we have access to the marker. So in our Mapster library, up in our _on function, all we have to do is pass back the options.object inside the call function. So now when the callback function is being fired off, we'll return back any event arguments, and then we'll also return back the object that the event was fired off on. So in our main script file, we'll log the event arguments and then the marker as well. And you can see right here we have the event arguments as well as the marker. So in this lesson, we were able to change our add marker function from adding just one event to adding multiple events. And we did this by providing an array of events. And also in our Mapster library, we took this function and abstracted it out so it can be used for any object that supports events, such as a map. And to get more control in our event listener, we pass through the object that the event was being fired off on in our callback handler. So now when we need to add multiple events to an object, it's as easy as going through and passing through an array of events.